It was a pretty interesting day nonetheless. There was a lot of conversation surrounding some big names. Mason Graham, who opted to sit out. You also had Abdul Carter, who is dealing with, this is something I've never heard of before either, a stress reaction in his foot. Like, I've heard of stress fractures and things like that, but a stress reaction in his foot. There was conversation on whether or not that he was going to need to get surgery on that and what that could all mean for him. I think he's going to be all right. I don't really think it's going to affect his draft stock. I don't really think he falls out of the top 4. Yeah, is it a bit of a concern? Maybe, but the talent is there. And when you look at the way this draft class is kind of shaping itself out, Abdul Carter is one of the 2 best guys in this draft class in a lot of people's eyes. And I would be hard-pressed to believe that a stress reaction, which again is a weird thing that I've just never heard of before, is what would hold him back from potentially being picked at like number 1 or number 2 or maybe number 3 if some wonky business happens at 1 and 2. Like, I just have a hard time seeing him making it past number 3, let alone number 4 if the Patriots get the opportunity to draft him. Like, that's as far as he's going, number 4. But who I really want to focus on here are some of the actual standouts. You had guys like Georgia's Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, Nebraska's Ty Robinson, Boston College's Donovan Ezeraku come in, show up, and show out. There was a lot of really fun performances to look at going through this very, quote, air quotes here for those of you that might just be listening, air quotes on this one, first day of the Combine. Let's not forget that there were people kicking footballs the day prior, but first day of the Combine for drills and people doing things like vertical leaps and long jumps and not long jumps, broad jumps, wrong jumping. But yes, a lot of conversation around some guys, some important guys, putting up some good testing numbers. Jihad Campbell impressed a lot of people with what he did as well. But the person that I need to highlight here, because off the chart numbers here, and it was just crazy to see it all play out, we have got to talk Shemar Stewart's day, because he looked unbelievable here. And I'm going to shout out MathBomb on X, also known as Kentley Platt, the guy, the creator behind what we all know as the relative athletic scores that have been going around the last few years on X and social media. If you look at the numbers here, coming from him himself, the man, the creator, go check out his work if you haven't already. Shemar Stewart, a defensive end prospect in the 2025 draft class. He scored an unofficial 9.99 RAS score out of a possible 10. This ranked number 3 out of 1,802 defensive end prospects ranging from 1987 to the year 2025, in which we currently reside. Now, the split's obviously projected. Times are unofficial, but you'll look at the numbers on there. This guy is a physical specimen, and that is maybe even potentially putting it lightly when you consider things like size and just who he is. It's pretty insane to see what he put together. When you look at the numbers, weighing in at a whopping 267 pounds, standing at 6'5". This is a big man who can run, who can jump. He's got explosiveness and just power in his legs. This guy is somebody that I think not only is flying up draft boards right now, but maybe have thrusted himself into first round conversation. Now, that is something that will be up for contention and up for debate between now and the actual draft. And of course, when the pro day comes around, that'll be something we all have to keep an eye on as well, because that'll be kind of like the icing on the cake, or maybe a nail in the coffin on that first round potential conversation here. And the reason I bring this up is because I saw a tweet from Tom Pelissero, or post, whatever you want to call it these days, but I saw something from him that I do want to mention here, because I thought it was an interesting piece of information here. Now, Tom Pelissero put this out saying on Monday that, I said on Monday that Shemar Stewart could put up Trayvon Walker type of numbers in Indianapolis. Walker, the number 1 overall pick in the 2022 draft, put up a also 9.99 relative athletic score. Today, Stewart obviously unofficially putting up a perfect 10, which then did get adjusted to that 9.99. Still unofficial, as the final numbers end up coming in a little bit later, but just an overall ridiculous athlete. And I think it's very interesting to go about highlighting this comparison here, because this is one of those situations where Abdul Carter is the guy, and then there's a lot of conversation about the guys behind him, but this is the time of year where the combine happens. Guys in shorts and t-shirts tend to show off their physical abilities in ways that maybe some people weren't quite anticipating, and then all of a sudden they're flying up boards and they're in conversations that maybe you did not expect them to be in. And I want to take you back to that draft class between Trayvon Walker and, of course, Aiden Hutchinson. A lot of people looked at Aiden Hutchinson as the guy in that draft class. He was going to be the number one pick. There was the rumblings of what was going to happen with Trayvon Walker, but a lot of people looked at Aiden Hutchinson as that guy. Now, do I think that I'm going to sit here and say that, all right, well, maybe Shemar Stewart's going to fly up the boards now. He's going to be the number one pick and usurp Abdul Carter as the best edge rusher in this draft right now? Not necessarily, but I do think that the numbers just overall are rather jarring, even just down to what these guys measured in at and weighed in at in their respective combine numbers. You look at, again, like I mentioned, Shemar Stewart, 6'5", 267. You look at Trayvon Walker, 6'5", 272. Both of these guys putting up some of the best relative athletic scores of their position all time, dating back to 1987. I don't think we're in a situation where Shemar Stewart's going to all of a sudden usurp Abdul Carter, even with the injury conversation that we briefly touched on earlier. But I do think that this is one of those guys that is going to jump on a lot of people's boards, because there are a fair amount of teams that are looking for that pass rush help on the edge. And after watching what happened in the Super Bowl this year, pass rushers, especially on the edge, have always come at a premium, and they're being paid top dollar for a reason, because they disrupt an offensive-heavy league. But after what we saw in this year's Super Bowl, I think that pressure to find that guy is getting even higher, and teams are going to be even more willing to make a jump. And this is a situation right now where, again, Shemar Stewart, sure, maybe he didn't have the most productive collegiate career, 4.5 sacks, only 12 tackles for loss, but it's not like Trayvon Walker himself even had that productive of a career. Yeah, that final year at Georgia was great, don't get me wrong. 6 sacks, was on a championship-winning team, but he only managed 9.5 sacks his entire collegiate career. Granted, maybe a little bit of less playing time. You're on a stacked Georgia roster. You're not getting in there as often until those final few years there. Maybe that's a part of the conversation as well, but it's not like Trayvon Walker had some ludicrous collegiate career himself. My point being, if you pair that raw size and athleticism of Shemar Stewart, and you have yourself some great coaching, great leadership, a clear direction, and a great scheme fit, there is a very good chance that Shemar Stewart winds up being that next Trayvon Walker. And I'm not saying he gets picked number one, but do not be surprised if this is someone that's going off the board far earlier than anyone anticipated, because if there's one thing that has been abundantly clear through time, scouts, GMs, coaches, they love those physical freaks of nature, and Shemar Stewart is on that board in my eyes.